All right. And so just a little bit about the landscape. We live in a world of user-generated content. This is a fact that I'm sure everyone is aware of. The social media presence that drives so much of our modern media landscape is user-generated. And we're looking at over 2.5 quintillion bytes generated every day. And this task of managing this much data is much larger, of course, than a human could ever take on their own. And yet we know this to be an essential part of how business is done. Fully 86% of companies use user-generated content as part of their marketing. Ads based on user-generated content receive 4 times higher click-through rates, and fully 1/4 of search results for the world's biggest brands are linked to user-generated content. And so why is this content moderation important? Why does this become an issue? Well, unfortunately, no matter what you do, you're going to have users that are posting inappropriate content on your site. And this ability to recognize and curate data that's on your site is essential. It's essential to protecting your brand identity. And so being able to recognize images and videos containing illegal and banned content, toxic, obscene, racist, or threatening language are essential to maintaining a safe user environment and maintaining the trust of your users. But the challenges are significant. This overwhelming volume of user-generated content is much more than a human staffed team could ever review. It's time-consuming to staff and train human moderators, and moderator exposure to toxic images can be traumatic, and there have been well-known lawsuits at Facebook, et cetera, related to people being exposed to some of the world's worst content, really. Additionally, data privacy becomes a large issue because when you have people actually looking at other people's content, that can be invasive. And the results you can get with a AI-powered moderation solution are significant. We put here that we can process these images 100 times faster than human moderators, but actually it could be much, much faster than that. It's really just as much processing power as you want to throw at the problem. This faster review of user-generated content means that you can get, if you're sending this content through an approval process, it means that the review time is reduced and content can be published on your site faster. And of course, this significantly reduces the manual work required to moderate. Now, there usually will be a human in the loop in this process at some point, but it can take on the vast majority of the moderation challenge. And as you may have noticed from the title of this presentation, what we're presenting is a multimodal approach to moderation. And the fact is that people are producing content that includes images, videos, and text, usually in some combination. And with a multimodal workflow, we're able to combine very specialized models, some that understand images, some that understand text, and some that classify text passages, into one solution that can make sure that you're moderating the full scope and meaning of the content that is passing through your site. And Tony is going to demonstrate exactly how this works for you now in our platform. And so I look forward to passing this over to Tony.
Thank you very much, Jeff. So we're here today to really talk about these multimodal workflows when it comes to addressing image moderation. Let's really start with the Clarifai portal. As part of the portal, what you see here is if you were to sign up for an account today, we have trials available. We can actually, this will be the exact same screen that you guys will wind up seeing if you sign up for a trial. And this is really the entry point into the Clarifai platform. This allows us to create applications that are specifically designed to satisfy use cases that you guys may be encountering in your everyday lives. And in this circumstance, we want to focus on moderation. So I'm going to go ahead and really create an application here that's going to allow us to start moderating images. We're going to really start with creating the application from scratch. So this is kind of a walkthrough about how you would be able to do this yourself. So let me go ahead and select the base workflow that we're going to be working with today. This is going to be around moderation. So we've got, Clarifai has created out-of-the-box models for all sorts of different moderation, as well as AI models for things like what we call our general model that's able to identify over 10,000 concepts out of the box. Our moderation model is mainly focused on exactly that, moderation. So let me go ahead and create an application that's focused on this. So here is my image moderation workflow application. Available out of the box, what we can wind up seeing is that this is going to function and provide simple image moderation that maybe you guys are already familiar with. What I'm going to do now is add some data to this so we can start to look at what it looks like when we're starting to moderate image content. So I've got some imagery that I want to be able to examine here. I'm going to focus on some of this this drug imagery that people would not want associated with their brand. I'm going to go ahead and add that into my application here. So what we can do now is we can jump over to our Explorer view. And within our Explorer view, we get to see all the imagery content that has been added for us to be able to run tests against. Now, our platform is an API-first platform, so we design all of our functions with the API in mind. So all of this can be programmatically handled. But what we see here is kind of visibility into what our APIs would see. So I'm going to go ahead and click our app workflow for moderation. And what we see here is that we get a prediction that's telling us the likelihood of the content here being containing drug references. Now, this allows us to get that simple view, the simple one step of looking at imagery. We want to be able to take this to the next level, right? So that can include things like, imagery that may be specifically offensive to particular regions, but specific to, new concepts that are coming out all the time. And so we see lots of meme imagery that's evolving over time. So user-generated content can kind of have an effect where, we start to see it being associated with some negative contexts. And so one of those contexts that we've been seeing has been related to the imagery of a character called Pepe the Frog. So I'm going to go ahead and add some content that's in regards to that. And so I don't know if everybody keeps up on this this kind of social media stuff when the news has been coming out, particularly over the last 6 months or so, with the association in the U.S. of this particular meme with violent right extremist groups. And whether or not that's true, whether or not that's accurate is something that can definitely be debated. But with that in mind, being able to capture this content and being able to evolve models on top of the Clarifai moderation model allows us to be able to capture that so it's not associated with your brand. So I've added in some imagery that would normally not necessarily be caught by image moderation models. And so what we wind up seeing is that this gets flagged as safe, even though it may not necessarily be safe. Okay. Sorry, I saw a question popping up. What was that, Jeff? Was that you?
The question was, I do image and text recognition simultaneously.
That's what we're going to be getting into, yes. So I'm just walking through the first steps now on how we can, add models, create models, and we're going to start to evolve that using the multimodal workflow. So that's kind of going to be part of the story here. All right. Okay, so here's our imagery. Here's we can see this particular image coming back as safe. But one of the keys that we want to be able to do is create a custom model that's going to start capturing whether or not this is negative imagery. So we're going to select our data And now it's as simple as being able to label our data. So I need to add a class that I'm going to classify this, this imagery into. I'm going to go ahead and create that class called Pepe the Frog. All right, go ahead and add that. And I'm going to go ahead and label the content as such. So go ahead and label that. And so what we see here is that we've added those concepts as Pepe the Frog, and we want to be able to create a model that's going to classify this. So I've selected our context-based classifier model here. So I'm going to go ahead and classify our custom moderation content. I'm going to select my concepts, and I'm going to go ahead and hit Create Model. Now I'm going to go ahead, and this is as easy as it is to train models within Clarifai. You know, I've added and labeled my data. I've created my model. I'm going to go ahead and hit Train Model here. And so what this does then is we have a trained model that's been transfer learned on top of our moderation content model. And so what we wind up seeing is that takes, you know, seconds, not minutes, not hours, to be able to train that kind of additional classification. So that's a very valuable point about our platform. So, all right, here's my image content moderation. Now I can go ahead and add in some more data. So I've got some data from a holdout data set that I wanted to try. Now we can see this is visually distinctive from the other imagery that we've been seeing. I'm going to go ahead and add this into my model and go ahead and see, you know, in my Explorer view here, what are we seeing with this? And I can look at my custom model predictions, and I see that Pepe the Frog has a 100% likelihood of this containing that imagery. So my custom model is now available for me to add into a multimodal workflow. Okay, so let me go ahead and I'm going to add in, we're going to start looking at some additional types of data, including the text data. So let me go ahead and hit Browse Files here. And I want to look at some meme data in particular, some meme imagery that contains text overlaying pictures. And so I've got a couple different meme images, some of which could certainly be offensive to the content, the person involved. So I'm going to go ahead and look at my Explorer view, and oh, he looks a little bit familiar. So what we see here, you know, spends all day at the data center, still uses PowerPoint to make memes, right? We see that kind of imagery. It's, you know, looking at our custom classifier model for Pepe the Frog, and we're not getting any hits on that. Good thing I don't look like him. Further, you know, we're seeing that this is safe imagery. But, you know, what we might also see is, you know, there might be some offensive text, some mean text that might be, you know, available there. That's not something that people should necessarily be putting around on the internet or you know, poking fun at other people. And we don't see, you know, this as particularly coming back as, you know, strongly negative, right? So we're not seeing a high likelihood that this shouldn't be published on a site. So that kind of imagery can certainly be, you know, negative, and you don't want that negatively impacting your brand. So what do we really need to do to be able to make this be filtered by our moderation mechanisms? What we really need to be able to do is start looking at the text, you know, detect whether there's text within our image set. We want to then be able to focus on cropping around that text. So we're just focused on the text content itself. We then want to be able to use OCR to be able to read the characters from the text. And we want to be able to aggregate that content together. So it's a string that we can then feed into our natural language processing text moderation models. So then we're able to see, you know, is this negative text? Is it toxic? Is it inflammatory in any way? And that way we can kind of get that visibility into, you know, how should we be moderating this text content that comes through as characters over image. So with that in mind, we want to be able to go and create what's called a workflow. And we're going to go into model mode. And so thinking back through my steps, one of those steps that I need to take is going to be text aggregation. And that text aggregation of pulling all the content together into a single string is going to be the only custom model that we're going to be using. So let's start out by creating our custom model, which is really one of the building blocks within our workflow that we're going to combine together to be able to, you know, deliver on this vision of multimodal workflows. So I'm going to hit Create Custom Model. I'm going to select my text aggregation model. And I'm going to go through and name that. Now there's a few parameters that I get to set here over how large within the image I want to look to be able to aggregate the text. And my goal is to be able to aggregate all of the text from all of the image. So I'm going to drag my slider bars all the way over to 100% to be able to collect all of the text from all of the imagery and put it into a single text blob, which then I will run through my NLP models. So I'm going to go ahead and create model, and that's as simple as creating that model can get. Let me go ahead and then go back to my model mode and select create workflow. So at this point, what I'm wanting to do is actually create my custom workflow that's going to focus on the actual multimodal part of the workflow here. So the first step is really going to be around that whole idea of visual text detection. Now, Clarifai has, once again, an out-of-the-box model that's already calibrated and ready for us to do visual text detection over my imagery. So I'm going to go ahead and add that into my workflow. My next step, as I was saying, was going to be focused on being able to crop. So my next step, I want to be able to select my model type, and I want to look for my image cropper. So right here, I've got my 1.0 image cropper, which means that the meaning of that is really focused on the margin size. So if I wanted to, allow larger margins around my text, I could go and select, the 1.1 cropper, which increases it by about 10%, or the 1.5 cropper that increases it by 50%. I'm going to focus on just being able to crop directly around my text and the bounding boxes that are found by that. Okay, so the next step is going to be OCR. And so I want to be able to find the OCR models, and I'm really going to be looking for models that include the output of text. So with that in mind, I'm able to select my text as output for my search and be able to select my visual text recognition. So that's what I'm going to be focused on here today. Next, I want to be able to use my custom model that I used for aggregation. So my text aggregation model here. And finally, I will want to then process that text that's output by my aggregator using natural language processing and our moderation model. So I'm going to select as the input text, so that kind of filters down what I'm looking for. And right here, we'll see we've got our language moderation that's multilingual. So this understands 52 different languages and is able to then allow for moderation over any of those. So go ahead and select all those. Down below here, I have all of my selected models as part of my workflow. And what I can then do is start to expand out the input nodes and tie these things together. So I've got my Clarifai visual text detection model. I've got the output of that. I want to be the input for my cropper. The output of my cropper, I want to be the input for my visual text recognition. The output of my visual text recognition, I want to be the input for my text aggregation. And finally, from my text aggregation into my language moderation. So that's as easy as it is to be able to create a workflow. And what we see here now is we can go back to our Explorer view and start to look at some of the more offensive data, that poor guy getting picked on the internet. I'm going to select my different workflows that I want to be able to hit, and I want to look at my multimodal text workflow. So as this is loading, we start to see content that's showing up across my imagery. It'll take just a second for it to run through all the models for the first time. And what we'll wind up seeing here is actually the output of each one of these individual boxes will be drawn around the text that's within my visual text detection. We'll then see the output of that to our cropper model. That cropper model will then be taking that through our visual text recognition and then aggregating and then putting it through language moderation. So we see our text being defined by bounding boxes. We see the results of our cropper here. We see our visual text recognition recognizing all of our text as individual words. And then we see that start to compile using our text aggregator. finally resulting in our multilingual moderation saying that this is toxic and it's not something that we want to be displayed on our site or relating to our content. So with that in mind, if we wanted to, we can then go and add in additional models to be able to take this a step further and say, okay, we want to start compiling this and then also running the imagery in parallel using our image moderation model itself. So without any sort of additional API calls, we would be able to then have this be a single workflow call that would then be able to allow us to see all of that at once. So let me go ahead and edit our workflow here. We're going to evolve this a little bit by adding in that custom Pepe module here. Okay, so the next part, we're going to want to select our, we first have to deal with what's called embeddings, and those are kind of the data that underlies the how we process image content. So we're going to look for our general, our moderation embeddings model here. Oh. This will take me just a second to find.
And just to interject a little bit, we can always filter by outputs and inputs. And as you can see here, Tony now filtered by the output of embeddings because that's what he needs out of this model.
Right. So I've got my image embeddings for moderation here. I'm going to go ahead and hit add. And now the final step is adding in our individually created Pepe workflow or model here. All right. Let me go ahead and hit refresh here. Sorry about that. Oh, well, that took me back. Live demos. All right. Clarify.
Yeah, and as Tony's configuring this, it might be a good time to kind of give a little bit of an overview of these different kind of models and how they interact. He mentioned the Embedder model, and this is a very innovative way that we've configured our platform to make it easy to transfer the learnings from one model to another. So the embedding is the multidimensional mathematical representation of how a model sees the world. And then by adding that context-based classifier on top of that, you meld these things together to create your custom models. But there are other model types as well, and you might see them in passing as he's configuring this up. The cluster model, for example, is what you would use to power search. And Clarifai offers a bunch of convenient ways to build visual search, visual similarity, and also text similarity search. So you can filter and sort your data based on how similar it is, how similar it looks. And I'm going to pass back over to Tony. Is that, yeah.
Sorry about that. It took me just a minute. My computer was having some issues with the mouse responding necessarily well, so I had to concentrate a little bit more than I normally would have. Let me go ahead and hit update workflow. I have gone through and wired together the output of our moderation embeddings into our image moderation workflow here. So we can now see that we can add this, update our workflow, and what we will go back to on our Explorer view here is, looking at this imagery, we see, the output of our multimodal model here. We also see imagery for moderation as well as classified custom moderation content added into our workflow now. And what we see for the output, now that it's reindexing, is that we'll also get in parallel the processing of both the image data as well as the text data. So we'll get back the same results that we were seeing with the Pepe meme detector, as well as the output of our regular text moderation model. So we now see that I am definitely not Pepe the Frog, as well as this being toxic text that's associated with this imagery. So with that, I would like to hand it back to Jeff, who's been so helpful. And let's go ahead and take some questions. And Jeff, you're talking on mute.
Yeah, so we'd love to open it up for questions here. And as a quick overview, maybe to give some context of how all of this fits together, and maybe I'll just leave this up as we talk. So Clarifai is building this end-to-end platform for the full AI lifecycle. And what we've zoomed in today on is the mesh workflow. And you can see that on the right-hand side of the diagram there. We also touched on Enlight, which is our training suite. I mentioned space-time a little bit, talking about the embedding models. But the idea here is that you're going to be able to have a system for ingesting, labeling, processing, cleaning your data, training your new models, and then networking them together into a full solution for your company. At any rate, that's what we're up to here. Let's take our first question from the audience. Let's see what we've got. Can you do image and text recognition simultaneously? Absolutely right. Now, there's a certain sense where they're not simultaneous. Now, this will be a sequential process as data goes from one node in your workflow through to other nodes in the workflow. So it is this graph of models that you're able to assemble in your solutions. And great question here about how the workflow would have changed if the text was not in the image but was just in the metadata. Great question, and we also can handle text inputs that are coming from a source other than from the image. It's just really a matter of configuring the right models for your case. If it takes text as an input, that text could have come as an output from one of your models in your workflow, or it could come from metadata that was associated with the image at the time it was predicted upon.
Exactly. So if you had some sort of text that was related to like a comment on an image, you could definitely feed that in using our text moderation model, which was what we were putting the output of our OCR into, right? So we took that, we piped that into our text moderation model, and you could do the exact same thing with just raw text data as well.
There's a question here about just how much faster this would be. We put up some numbers at the beginning of the talk that I was talking about a little bit, saying that it could be 100 times faster. And I would just say it would be at least 100 times faster. We're talking about the difference between a human being making a decision on each individual image and input that comes your way versus a scalable server system that can really handle as much as you throw at it. And this Armada predict piece of the story is it's sort of the bedrock on which a lot of what we do is built. And this is a scalable prediction infrastructure that's able to load your models on demand and adjust based on the needs of traffic coming into the system. And it takes a lot of the work out of actually managing this kind of technology in production. Let's see if we've got some more questions here. One question about is there any type of scoring to determine how bad the text image is? Yes, that is what you would get. So for each prediction that is made by a given model, you are given a score, which is the model, which can be thought of as just the model's confidence that it is right to be naming, to be labeling a given input in a given way. So that's exactly that value you see as a prediction, and it's normalized over a 1 to 100 scale. If multimodal workflows use several model layers, we would expect cost and runtimes to be proportional to the layers, or the multi-layers effectively combined into a single step processing. There is a lot of optimization that happens under the hood. So you would get better performance assembling these models in a workflow than you would calling each model independently in the API. But I don't know how much more to get into on that part of the story. Tony, any comments there?
Yeah, I mean, you get to make a single API call that would then issue the command to the workflow engine to consume your data, and then be able to run that through the multiple layers that may make up that particular workflow model. So you do wind up seeing performance benefits, runtime benefits, as far as as CPU costs and stuff like that. I mean, that is you're still going to be performing the same functions, but the way that the data is passed over, say the network, you're going to wind up seeing fewer external network calls. It's just going to be contained within that single API call.
Another question here is just, do I need the Clarifai platform to do this? Well, in a certain sense, yes, that's what we're talking about. But if you're asking, do you necessarily use that user interface that we're talking about, that Tony was just demonstrating, that can be a part of your workflow, or it can all be done through API. This is a point that Tony had made, but maybe just to expand on it a little bit, where you would be able to really integrate this functionality into your software solution stack just by making these API calls. So whatever your company's front-facing solution might be, or internal service that you're providing might be, these are going to just be the calls to the Clarifai platform to get this intelligence out of the system. If that answers the question. So that may be it questions-wise. Anything else, any other questions people have today for us? Well, thank you very, very much for joining us. Have you seen, one more question, have you seen interesting real-world use cases similar to this demo? You bet, yeah. I mean, we have, active customers out in the real world using our moderation solution every day.
Yeah, I mean, particularly social media networks, companies that have, user-generated content. This is a very valuable thing for them to be able to utilize. And so we see a lot of value coming from these companies using that, which is kind of why we wanted to show it today.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's social media, and also e-commerce solutions see a lot of user-generated content. And we work with clients where, for example, they have like a used retail sort of marketplace, and they require moderation there as well. Pretty much anytime you're exposing, your company to user-generated content, there is this real risk of bad actors out there, kind of.
And large retailers who have reviews on their site, they take advantage of this as well. Product reviews, and there's other ways that this can be taken too. Maybe veering off from the pure moderation use cases, you can use this technology to detect your product in an image. And then if there's metadata associated with that, like someone offering a review of some kind, you'd be able to categorize the sentiment in the review. So that's not really a moderation. Maybe they're not saying anything particularly harmful, but you do want to know whether or not people are happy out there. And this is a way to listen to social streams for that kind of a purpose. Okie dokie. All right. If there's any other questions, we're certainly happy to field them. Great memes, I agree. Tony's memes cracked me up. I thought that was great. We'll be providing the recording for the webinar. You'll get an email if you were already on this presentation. We'll also be providing them on our YouTube channel and the link there. So, does the model consider text and image together, or do they run separately? So they would be run separately in this sort of a scenario. We're talking about specialized models, one that understands text and one that understands images. All right. All right, and can we post the slide link in the chat? I'm not sure if we've done that in the past, but we certainly could.
I'm not sure that we would share this document publicly. Let me cycle back with the rest of my team and see if that's the way to go. And Ahran will share it by email. Yeah, you'd like to get it that way. Okie dokie. Yep, and again, the recording will be available. The deck is not. Okay. All right, guys. Thanks so much. Thanks for joining us.